All right, I'm going to introduce the episode as I always do, and then we will begin. On another episode of Soothing Semantics, ladies and gents, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. I'm your host, Rafi Pinsky, and today we have a very interesting guest by the name of Yehuda HaKohen. He currently lives in the West Bank, a highly disputed piece of land. People who are pro-Israel are in complete support of the Jews living in that land. People who are not pro-Israel or anti-Israel are not in support and see that as disputed territory, occupied land. And it's become a very heavy topic of conversation, especially when social media became a thing. I mean, it was always a topic of discussion, but now especially with the constant fighting in the West Bank that's been going on over the past few months, this has been talked about over and over and over again. So Yehuda, thanks for joining me.
Good to be with you.
Awesome. So a lot of topics to cover. We're going to cover the history of the Jewish people to some degree, when we were there, how we came back, why we have legitimacy, what the new government is going to, how it's going to shape the state of Israel, and possible solutions and what we can do moving forward. Okay. So real quick, Yehuda HaKohen works closely with Rudy Rushman, who I had on my channel not too long ago, who is a very strong supporter of Israel and tries to bridge the gap between not only Israelis and Palestinians, but helps to educate people from all over the world on why the Jews should have a homeland, should live there, and what we can do to bring peace. So you also have your organization. Okay, essentially the organization. I mean, you and Rudy started it alone, or you do it with other people as well?
No, I started it with some people. Rudy was not involved actually, but he has been involved, like in and out over the years. The Vision Movement, you can check it out at visionmovement.org or visionmagazine.org. And a lot of interesting people, thought leaders who are really thinking very critically about what are the goals of Jewish history, what's already been accomplished, what's left to achieve, what obstacles are standing in the way, and what we can do to be characters in the story of smashing those obstacles. So we're basically coming from a perspective that Zionism was a very successful movement. We'd say that Zionism was a link in the chain of several Jewish liberation movements, meaning from the time the Romans displaced us until we established the state of Israel in 1948, there was probably, on average, one major attempt to return to our land and take possession of our land every century. And pretty much all of these movements failed over 2,000 years until Zionism. Zionism is the one that actually succeeded. And it creates a lot of confusion for people, because what we've done as a result of Zionism being the successful one is we've anachronistically used that word to describe all of the attempts that came before it. Like, for example, next week is the festival of Hanukkah, right? Like I actually am talking to you from the mountain that was the headquarters of the Maccabee partisan, like the Maccabee guerrilla army. This was their partisan camp here. This is the mountain where Matityahu died. Outside my window is the valley where Yehuda Maccabee was killed. Like, we have their caves, we have their olive presses, we have their wine presses, their guard towers on this mountain. This is where Yehuda basically trained, a bunch of farmers and teachers to be guerrilla fighters, and fight a 26-year war against Syrian Greek rule in our land. And there are a lot of people today who will call that movement a Zionist movement, will refer to Yehuda Maccabee as a Zionist, or Bar Kokhba as a Zionist. And the truth is, they weren't Zionists, right? It's almost the same as calling Jesus a Palestinian, right? Like, it's taking like a modern term that means something today and retroactively applying it, to somebody who didn't use that word and might not have known what that word would have meant. So, so I'd say that Zionism was a very complicated movement. It was you can look at Zionism from one perspective and say, well, this is an indigenous people's liberation movement, but you could also look at Zionism from another perspective and say this is a colonial project that came out of Europe. both are technically true because the Jewish people are complicated. We're really complicated. We're probably the only example I know of an ancient people that was displaced from its land, managed to hold on to its identity for roughly 2,000 years and actually come back, like return to the land it was displaced from, and take possession of that land, largely using the tools of colonialism. So it's very easy to see the Zionist movement both ways. And I think that, and I think that whatever somebody thinks of Zionism, we can say it succeeded to a large degree. It might not have succeeded at doing everything it set out to do. Like, for example, it didn't normalize the Jewish people. We didn't become a normal people as a result of Zionism. We're still abnormal. And it didn't end anti-Semitism. There's still anti-Semitism in the world. Zionism didn't solve that problem. But I think that Zionism did achieve many of the deeper aspirations of the Jewish people. Like a lot of the things we say in the Amidah, in like the Tefillot 3 times a day in the synagogue, that, you know, that we've wanted, you know, those Tefillot, I don't know if people are aware of this, but you know, when you open up a book in the synagogue and you start to lehit palel, I don't like to use the word pray because it's a very Christian concept. It's a very different thing that we do. But when we start to lehit palel, when we do what's called the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei, the words we're saying are actually what for, you know, probably until the time of the Haskalah, until the time of the Jewish Enlightenment a couple hundred years ago, that's pretty much what almost every Jew everywhere in the world deeply wanted. Those are the things that we were yearning for. Those are the things those were our like deepest aspirations on a real level. It wasn't like we go into the synagogue, we say the words in the book, we close the book, go out and try to go like make money and like bed women and like, you know, win the lottery. Like, we were actually like directing our lives towards those goals. And which was a very difficult situation to be in, because practically speaking, those goals were very unachievable, you know, in the conditions we were in, until Zionism changed that. Right? So Zionism did achieve some of those real deep aspirations that we'd been carrying with us for thousands of years, maybe even unintentionally. But now I think we have to acknowledge that Zionism is over. I think it ended in 1967. I think it ended when we came back to Zion, to Jerusalem. And I think that since then, the Jewish people have been ready for a new liberation movement that can protect Zionism's positive achievements while cleaning up its mess, while addressing its flaws and correcting them, and actually trying to identify the next objectives of Jewish liberation, figuring out what comes after Zionism. Zionism is the movement that built the vessel, right? Like, I have this cup here. Zionism built the cup. We have a state again, we have an army again, we have an economy, we have a government, but now we need to fill the cup with content. Now we need to figure out what the point of all that is. What are the values? What's the identity? What are the higher aspirations that are going to drive that cup, that are going to fill that cup with content and give it meaning? So Zionism did a great job building the vessel. Now we got to fill that vessel with spirit, with content, and do something with it that's going to benefit all of humanity. Because ultimately, our liberation is not just our liberation. You know, we've historically seen ourselves as existing for the sake of humanity. And every time we've had power in history, we've benefited humankind in one way or another. And this time should be no different. Now that we have power again for the first time in 2,000 years, we should be thinking about how that's going to be beneficial for all of humankind.
That's beautiful. And I very much agree. So there's so much to unpack. So we'll go step by step. We'll go step by step. So
that's why the Vision Movement was started. The Vision Movement was started to really educate young Jews to be able to identify and work towards achieving the next goals of Jewish history. That is the purpose of what we do. If people want to check us out, go to our magazine, visionmag.org. I have a podcast there. I actually have 2 podcasts there, and some other people do as well, and plenty of articles, plenty of videos. And there's also visionmovement.org, which is like where you can check out all our programs that we offer, online and in-person educational programs.
Fantastic, guys. Make sure to check it out. I'm going to drop the links, and I'll have my editor drop I'll have him drop a slide that'll come onto the screen so people can actually see what it looks like. So you mentioned that the Zionist movement had some very big positive components, which I acknowledge as well. what are some of the biggest negative components that we still see today that you're trying to address or that we can address?
I think that, there are things that are definitely negative today and might have even been negative at the time, but I'm not sure, honestly, we would have been able to achieve what we achieved, or Zionism would have been able to achieve what it did without that. It's a question because history happened the way it happened. I think that I think a major flaw in the Zionist movement is that it related to the Jewish people as an object with a problem, as opposed to a subject with desires. Meaning, if you see the Jewish people as an object with a problem, that problem could be anti-Semitism, it could be persecution, it could be assimilation, it could be homelessness, whatever that problem is. Zionism said, okay, well, this is a solution. But the people of Israel who were more connected to our identity, I would say, really saw the Jewish people as a subject with desires. There's something we want. There's something that we're aiming to change in the world. There's something that we're looking to bring to humanity. And that's more like being on a mission. It's not because of anti-Semitism, it's not because of persecution, but it's because we're here to do a job and we're going to do it. And this is what we need to get it done. And that requires us to be in our land, and that requires us to have self-determination in our land, and that requires us to have a society here that really does express our identity and our values, and hopefully create structures and models that can that can introduce something new into the world, help the world move past where we're currently stuck. Because I think if you look at, for example, even like the systems that exist right now, capitalism or ideological liberalism, these might be better than what came before, but they're not the best humanity can do. And I think that part of what we came home for is to actually figure out better ways to organize an economy, better models of minority rights, better ways to deal with a lot of the challenges that are confronting us in the 21st century, confronting not only us, but all humankind.
Okay, very valid. Now, what do you, this all comes, when I think of what you're saying, it makes me think about the current status quo, right? So if you mention minorities and what we can do for them, we currently have a very challenging status quo, right? So for whoever doesn't understand, you have Israelis that live in Israel with citizenship, with Israeli citizenship, and they are much better off financially and economically than Palestinians, say, in Gaza or the West Bank. So to me, there's no validity as to whether Jews should be living there or not. The challenge is, what in the world do we do with the millions of Palestinians that are living in Gaza, living in the West Bank, where their leadership they're set out to destroy Israel and create, I guess, what they call a Muslim ummah, like a caliphate. So what do we do, right? Because it's, on one hand, we don't want to be naive, right? You have to understand, as a Jew or as a human, you don't want to give an inch and someone takes a mile. So that's the conundrum. What do you suggest?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I accept all the premises of your question. I think there are a lot of things you take for granted in that question that I might not agree with. Okay. But let's say, for example, Islam. If we're an object with a problem, then we can say, all right, maybe there are at least some interpretations of Islam, or weaponized interpretations of Islam, that could be very dangerous and scary, and we want to protect ourselves from. But if we're a subject with desires, we're going to ask, well, what is the ideal, what is the ideal belief system for somebody who's not us, for somebody who's not from the tribes of Israel, right? Maybe it's Islam. Maybe Islam is the ideal Noahide religion. Maybe that's a movement, like Islam. It could be the movement that helps all of the non-Jews in the world come close to the Creator and be the best versions of themselves. I don't know. But again, we have to come from the perspective of like, what's our mission and how do we achieve it, not who hates me right now. Because a lot of people might hate us right now. Some people might hate us because for bad reasons. People might hate us for good reasons. I mean, we've, like, just to give a easy example that's relevant to our conversation, Zionism, one of the flaws, you asked me to tell you some of the negative features of Zionism, it hurt people. A lot of people got hurt as a result of what the Zionists did. I think, look, it's easy for me to criticize living in the wake of Zionism's success. It's easy for me to say, well, Zionism used, colonial methodology to bring the Jewish people back home. I mean, all of the Zionist leaders knew that we were from this land and we were only ever not here as a result of a crime committed against us. But in the process of returning us here, they, in terms of, like, practically speaking, many of the tools they used were colonial tools. I mean, they learned them essentially in Europe. These were tools that were largely successful. It's complicated when we utilize them because we're coming back to the land that we had been displaced from. We were basically a refugee population coming home. And until the Haskalah, we knew we were a refugee population. It was only in the wake of the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment, that Jews in certain parts of Europe started to think of themselves as like Germans with a religion called Judaism, or Frenchmen with a religion called Judaism, or Americans with a religion called Judaism. Before that, we were basically Palestinian refugees for 1700 years that were, organizing our communities according to a portable version of the national culture we left behind, committed, determined to return to that land and to reestablish independence and to rebuild our civilization. That's what we always told ourselves would happen. Every Pesach Seder, every wedding, every Yom Kippur, like that was just our story. That was the theme of Jewish history, that we're going to come back to our land and we're going to rebuild our civilization. And now we're in the process. It's very exciting. We're actually living in one of the most amazing chapters of our people's story, that we've actually come back, and we're here, but we don't 100% know what we're doing here. And we've come back in a way that was maybe a little bit not what our ancestors expected. If you talk to, our ancestors 600 or 700 years ago, and you tell them how the Zionist movement would do what it did, and it would maybe seem a little strange to them that those Jews are going to do it. Like, these guys are going to succeed at bringing us back. Like what do they know, right? But they did. Like, that's the way the author of history made it happen. And there are reasons for that. But now we're here, and we're in a very, we're in a very interesting situation. Like, even if you look at our most recent election, where it seems like Israeli society is changing. There's a transition taking place, and it's very scary for some people. It's very exciting for others, and there are a lot of questions. There are a lot of people in Israel and out, who are looking at what's going on here politically, and wondering, well, where's this going to go? What's going to be the ramifications of this? And I'm of the opinion that this is not like a fluke. I don't think that these election results are just like a one-off and, next time it'll go back the other way. I think this is more or less, you might have like some dips, but for the most part, this is more or less the socio-political trajectory of Israeli society. Like, we're talking about a society where certain people have been having a lot of kids for decades and other people have been having very few. And now we're seeing like the results of that coming home to roost.
So okay. What happens is there's like 5 different topics, and I want to make sure to co-roll them.
All right.
No, well, not 5 different topics. It was very relevant. They're all very relevant to each other. A lot of people have an issue with Zionism, at least from the Arab side, seemingly, because they don't like that the leaders of Zionism weren't religious whatsoever. They were secular. It's interesting that they bring this up, because you and Rudy have mentioned in some of your videos, the vision movement's connected to Habayit, or?
No, I mean, I have a lot of friends, and at Habayit, it's not the same movement. I know that Rudy was very heavily involved in Habayit for a while, and I don't know if he still is, but I have friends there, and sometimes we've collaborated on projects. But no, the vision movement is a vision movement, and Habayit is a Habayit.
Okay, so it's a separate thing. So that's something they say. They say that it's not even as if the Jews were religious or kept, the belief in God and whatnot. These were completely secular and oftentimes atheist individuals who came in and established a state. Unfortunately, there was a lot of violence and whatnot. So do you think that that has a part to play? Because you did mention that in a sense, it was a good thing that they weren't, or maybe I misunderstood you.
I think that's the way it meant. Look, we are not. First of all, to answer that question, you have to really struggle with the question of what are the Jews? Are we a religion? Are we a nation? Are we a culture? Are we a race? What are the Jews? And the challenging part is that we actually predate all those social constructs. We're not a religion. We're not a nation. We're not a race. We're an ancient civilization, maybe similar to the Aztecs. We have a spiritual component, we have a legal component, but we also have a national component and a territorial component. And I think that even like in Europe, when we suffered many layers of colonization, beginning with the Romans just dominating us in our land and eventually displacing us, and just all, especially Ashkenazi Jews, by the way. We went through many traumatic centuries of very harsh persecution and colonization. And I mean, even the fact that, I know I've mentioned the Haskalah a couple times, but even the fact that at a certain point when French or German leaders were willing to include us, were willing to grant us inclusion and whiteness to a certain extent, the fact that we wanted those things is a result of the persecution we suffered as a result of not having them previously. So we haven't really healed ourselves yet. And I think that part of what happened is that there is a dialectical relationship between the Haskalah and the Zionist movement. On the one hand, the Zionist movement is a rejection of the Haskalah's take on Jewish identity, like kind of turning us into a religion, like the Zionists say, no, wait a minute, we're a people, right? But at the same time, Zionism wouldn't have been possible without the Haskalah. I think that kind of led to the emergence of Zionism. So I'd say both are expressions of the tribal force of Yosef. When we have these conversations, I think it's important to realize that terminology like liberal and conservative, or right and left, or religious and secular are framings that really are very connected to the development of Western civilization. Whether we're talking about Greco-Roman ideas, whether we're talking about Christianity, whether we're talking about the revolutionary transition from feudalism to capitalism, like all those words, right, left, religious, secular, liberal, conservative, make a lot of sense within Western civilization, and they can more or less describe to you, okay, who is this person? Oh, he's a religious leftist. You know what he is, right? He's a conservative, you know what he is. But with us, these words don't really, when you try to use those words to describe the Jewish political map, especially the Israeli political map, the Jews in the land of the Jews, then you're just totally misunderstanding and making errors in your analysis. And that's a mistake I think a lot of people make when they try to understand Israeli society. They kind of superimpose Western political framings that don't make sense according to who we are. So I would say a better way of understanding the different camps within Israel are actually the tribes, like the tribe of Yehuda, and the tribe of Yosef, and the tribe of Yisachar, and the tribe of Zvulun, and the tribe of Shimon, and Dan, and Levi, and Asher, and Naphtali, and Gad, etc. So Yosef is one of the leadership tribes of Israel that is very good at managing the material world, like Jews who are good at things like building building states or building economies or banking or business or science, managing the material world, building armies, whatever it is, and are also usually very connected to the dominant civilization of any given period, whether it was Egypt in the time of the original Yosef, whether it was Greece in the time of the Maccabean revolt, or whether it's the Western world right now. And so the messianic force of Yosef, what we call Mashiach ben Yosef, is when that's repurposed towards Jewish liberation, towards like the goals and mission of the Jewish people. That's what we call Zionism. Zionism is the movement of Mashiach ben Yosef, the messianic movement of Yosef, where we build the vessel, where we build, it's like the physical rebirth, the material rebirth of the Jewish people. And what happened is after the success of Zionism, that tribe, the Zionists, basically regressed back towards their assimilationist impulse. They did their job. They built the state, they built the economy, they built the army, they did all those things. And now Zionism is basically Tel Aviv, like, or neo-Zionism, whatever. They just want to be a nation like other nations. They just want to be UN. And they're threatened by like when you look at these elections, what's really happening in these elections is other tribes are starting to gain dominance. They're not Yosef tribes, meaning because Yosef so much resembles the Western world, within those political parties, the parties that are really expressions of the tribal force of Yosef, you have what looks like a linear political spectrum like in the Western world. You have liberal and conservative expressions of Yosef because they're basically resembling the Western world. But when you start to deal with the Haredi parties, like the Palestinian parties, or the national religious parties, they don't exist on that spectrum. They're something else. They're considered dangerous and scary and extreme for different reasons, but that's because they're outside of the box of the Western political spectrum. And so that's why a lot of people are having trouble understanding what just happened here in the elections.
That's very well put. It's a totally different animal. I mean, in America, you have, hold on. In America, you have a melting pot of people where everyone comes together to make their money. You can have an Israeli that left Tel Aviv and a Palestinian who left Ramallah, and now they both live in New York. They have their businesses. C'est la vie, everything's great. This happens very often.
Right.
In Israel, being that we want to keep a Jewish majority, whether that be religious or not, we have to do certain things that a typical American democracy cannot do, that a typical Western democracy cannot do. And that's where things get very tricky, and that's why the meat and potatoes of the conversation, well, I mean, there's so many different kinds of meat and potatoes here, but a topic that is extremely important is how in the world do we move forward? That's what's so challenging.
So, well, that's the silver lining. I think that Zionism and the movement of Mashiach ben Yosef, the people who established the state, and when I say Zionism, I mean like the Zionist movement, the ideas of the thinkers that drove the Zionist movement, that outlook doesn't have solutions to our current problems. That's one of the reasons why we need a new Jewish liberation movement that comes after Zionism, right? Like a post-Zionist Jewish liberation movement. So I think that right now you can say that the state of Israel is like a European-style nation state, because Zionism basically borrowed European nationalism and they put a Jewish, Magen David on it, like a Star of David on it, and called it a Jewish nationalism. But it's really a Jewish flavor of European nationalism in many ways. And basically the state of Israel is like a European-style nation state with Jewish decorations and a Jewish demographic majority. And that's how we define Jewish state. When we say, well, what makes a state Jewish? We say, well, the decorations, the fact that the flag has a Star of David on it, the fact that the national anthem is a tikva, the fact that the language is Hebrew, like that's what makes the state Jewish, and a demographic majority. And that's the skin of the state. I'm less interested in the skin of the state being Jewish. I'm more interested in the skeleton and the organs of the state being Jewish. And I think that that really creates a lot of space for us to be flexible in terms of where we can go with Palestinians. I think that right now, the Jewishness of the state is very hard and very shallow, meaning it's so hard that it's too Jewish for Palestinians or other non-Jews here, but it's so shallow that it's not Jewish enough for the Haredim and for some of my neighbors. And so I think instead of Israel having a hard and shallow Jewish identity, we need to have a soft and deep Jewish identity. And what I mean is the structures of the state, meaning I would like it to, first of all, obviously I support a one-state solution. I think there should be a single state between the river and the sea that where we all have equality and equal access and democratic rights. I favor participatory democracy, not representative democracy. I just think that participatory democracy is much more democratic. And when I say democratic, I mean empowering people to be able to influence the structures they live under. That is my definition of democracy. I think in Israeli society, it's often misused as a synonym for Westernization. You see that a lot in the news now, like when people are screaming about the need to protect Israeli democracy, what they really mean is like the Western features of Israeli identity, like the things that make us like America and like Europe. And for me, that's not necessarily democratic. I think that, some of those features might be okay in certain cases, but democracy for me, I'm very principled about my understanding of what that means. It means empowering people to be able to influence the structures we live under. So when it comes to our democracy, I think Palestinians and Jews should be equal. We should both have equal ability to be able to influence the structures we live under. That's important.
So this leads me to, and I love the points you're making, because I think that personally, I love this idea. I think one state is a better option. The worry, obviously, people have is the Muslims, having more of them than they're. Let me articulate this properly. The concern from many Jews, whether it be inside or outside of Israel, have a concern that Palestinians having a higher birth rate will eventually outnumber us.
Mm-hmm.
They might, and they very possibly will outvote us as a result. So if, say, there are, I don't know how many Palestinians there are inside and outside of Israel. Do you have a number? I mean, what do you think?
I mean, the numbers are fluid and the numbers are also politicized. So I would say the numbers are irrelevant, because whatever the numbers are, I think we should be working towards the same ideal. We should make whatever solution we come up with needs to be one that makes demography irrelevant. One thing I'll tell you, though, is that the fastest growing population between the river and the sea is not Palestinian. It's
Haredim, yeah.
Right, and I think Jews like me and Palestinians are kind of tied for second place. So, so it's not. I'm not so worried about that. And again, I think that if we're really able to reconcile in a real way, and we're able to have like real peace, we're going to care about what's important to each other. So for us, it's important that the state express our identity and values, not in a way that makes people who are not us feel excluded, but in a way that makes us feel like this is what we've been looking for 2,000 years. And so I think that if we make on a very deep level, the structures and the policies Jewish in such a way that people with a real Jewish education would just kind of like see the Jewishness of the state, feel it, experience it would just be obvious to them, because they'll see the way, I don't know, our transportation system works, and they'll say, oh yeah, that's in the Gemara, or they'll see the way our sanitation system works, or our education. So they'll just like see it like being manifested. They'll see like Jewish identity being manifested in all of the different features of our national existence. But someone who's not a Jew won't feel that there's anything they don't get to have that we get to have because we're Jews and they're not. Meaning nobody should feel othered or excluded as a result of not being Jews. And the ability to see the Jewishness of the state should almost be dependent on a person's level of Jewish education. And anyone who's just like without a Jewish education, just doesn't know these things, isn't familiar with our culture, our history, our identity, etc., they would just see like a democratic society that functions very well and everyone's equal.
Okay. And again, I love how that is. So here are a few, I guess we can call them devil's advocate questions.
Sure, go for it.
If we have a majority of Israelis that are either secular or atheist, and they want to, for instance, wear bikinis on the beach and do things that may not be religiously permissible, so to speak, and many of the Palestinians aren't doing those kinds of things, but many of them may very well want to. Actually, they just can't. They just can't. If we're bringing more of Torah value or Jewish law into the scene of things, which could be very beneficial, how do we work that out with opposing views on each side?
No, so when I talk about the state being Jewish or functioning in a Jewish way, I'm not talking about coercing people's behavior. I'm not talking about saying you can't, have this in your refrigerator, or you can't use your phone on Shabbat, or you can't wear a bikini at the beach. I don't think, I don't, I don't know if anybody's speaking in that way. But if your dog damages my bicycle and we go to court in Jerusalem, I think the judge, instead of ruling according to British common law, he should rule according to Bava Kama. He should rule according to our people's conception of what justice is in a situation where one person's property damages another person's property. Meaning that will make the state, our legal structure, deeply Jewish, but nobody's being forced. Again, that's one of the reasons I don't like this like social construct of religion. When you think of it as a religion, then it's like, it feels very restrictive, and it feels very Christian, honestly. But when we think of it, it's just like our people's ancient culture. It's just like one of the native cultures of this land. Shabbat is part of like the native culture of this land. You come to Jerusalem, you spend Shabbat in Jerusalem, or you spend Shabbat in a Jewish community in the West Bank, and you don't feel it as like a religious thing that's going on. You feel it like it's just part of the national culture, just part of what's going on in this country.
Real quick, I love that you're saying this because I watched Tal, the traveling clat who I just had on my podcast. He was with you going into shul, synagogue for non-Jews, and he asked you this. He said, "Do you think most people in this village are praying 3 times a day?" And your response was amazing. Your response was, "It's not something that people feel obligated to do. It's their way of life. It's something that you just do living here in this area." And I found that very interesting, and it made perfect sense. So say that the new government decides to annex the West Bank, theoretically, and now Israelis and Arabs are living side by side. They're granted citizenship. Is there a law of return? Can Palestinians, say from New York, come back and live there? Because some of them might want to. And then what do we do with the Palestinians that just don't want peace? Because I believe that even in this instance, I have a hard time believing there won't still be groups that say, nice. Okay, now we're living amongst them. Now we get to infiltrate all of their towns and cities. Now we're just living everywhere they live. There might, maybe some Palestinians will want to, post up in Efrat and say, "Hey, well, we're citizens too now. We want to buy property." How do we concern these security risks? Because there very well might be.
I mean, look, where I come from, I think the best way to think about security risks is simply to just be more dangerous than the people you're worried about. Like, I think that question kind of comes from the perspective that we are lambs and they are wolves. I think a lot of Jews see it that way, unfortunately. I think a lot of Israelis see it that way. We are lambs, they are wolves, meaning like we need military structures to protect ourselves because they're wolves and we're lambs. I'm a wolf too. And therefore, I don't need a checkpoint and a wall and all these military structures or oppressive systems to protect me from them.
That is a beautiful, that that, because if you think about it like this, the other countries that have a primary group, I mean, the difference though, kind of backtracking a bit. The difference though is if they have a heavy percentage. Now, let's say they're 50% of our population, it creates more of a challenge. And most Muslim countries, for instance, the Jews and the Christians were such a minority that even if they were wolves to the point where they were a lot more dangerous than the primary inhabitants, they would have a very hard time winning. And I think a concern is if we do allow them all in and we do take all the land back and now they have citizenship, if they make up a very large percentage, 50, maybe even higher, we'll have a harder time defending the land. I mean, I think that's a valid concern.
All this, again, right now it's a hard thing to talk about because right now we're enemies. We really are enemies. We've been enemies for over 100 years.
Right.
And I think that in the minds of most Israelis, they're to blame. The Palestinians, they're to blame. They started it. They just want to kill us. You heard that how's it go? Like if the Arabs put down their weapons, we'd have peace.
Golda Meir statement, yeah.
Right. If the Israelis put down our weapons, we'd be dead or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what most Israelis believe, not just in the West Bank, in Gush Dan, Tel Aviv, where that's what most Israelis believe. They believe that the reason we don't have peace is because the other side just wants to kill us, that they just want to be violent against us. And Palestinians believe something else. They're having a different experience. I think that's part of our problem here. We've been experiencing this conflict so differently for the last 102 years that we're not even fighting each other. We're fighting our fantasies of the other. I often talk about narratives, like the Jewish and Palestinian narratives here. When I say narrative, I mean a collection of facts that are selectively chosen, organized to tell a story, and contextualized within an ideological worldview. And I think what we both do, Israelis and Palestinians, is we have this habit of picking the facts we like that help us tell the story we want to tell, and kind of ignoring the facts that complicate that story. We both do it. And
confirmation bias.
Yeah, and we're doing it. Most of us are doing it subconsciously. Most of us aren't aware of it, but we're both doing it, and we're both telling true stories when it comes to ourselves and our experiences for the most part. But we're both really getting it wrong when we talk about the other. We're actually both on both sides. I think Israelis and Palestinians, by and large, are deeply threatened by the identity and narrative of the other. We feel that if their story is true, that makes our story less true. And therefore, we feel like our narratives are in conflict. And we're both, it's funny because the role I play in the Palestinian story is not who I really am. I'm this fantasy antagonist that they need to fight. And the role they play in our story is not who they really are. It's this fantasy antagonist. So I think that, one of the things we need to do, when I talk about a one-state solution when we're living together, one of the things that obviously needs to change either first or certainly at the beginning of the process is how we experience each other. Meaning, as long as we're experiencing each other as enemies, we're not going to have peace, whether we're talking about a one-state or a two-state or a federation or a confederation or an eight-state. It doesn't matter what the solution is. If the relationship's bad, then it's going to be bad. A Palestinian colleague of mine, Sami Awad, likes to say that, everybody likes to talk about solutions, which is like talking about the frame around a picture. But what we need to do is fix the picture. We need to fix the picture inside. And when we fix the picture inside, then we can consider many frames. But if we're just trying to find the magic frame that will fit the ugly picture and make the ugly picture better, we're not going to find it. There's no solution that can work until the relationship dynamics change. And the only way to change the relationship dynamics is to have the courage to look at the story of the other really, to really understand the story of the other, including how we're perceived in that story, including the things we've done to make ourselves perceive that way. They might be getting it wrong because they don't know a lot of other things about us or why we did the things. I'm going to give you an example, and this is going to bring us back to the question of Zionism. One of the things that the Zionist movement did is they established these they established this concept of avodah ivri, like Hebrew labor, Jewish labor, and they established Jewish only labor unions, right? So think about it from a Palestinian perspective. You have these people coming from Europe, right? Some of them might claim they're from this land, but how do we know? right? Like these people coming from Europe, they seem to be developing a lot, building a lot, and creating infrastructure and creating jobs, but not for us, just for them, right? So, and not only that, if one of these, Jewish enterprises decides to hire Palestinians, they're, shamed and boycotted by the other Jews, right? Now, that's true, that happened. The Zionist movement did that, but there's a reason we did that Palestinians are completely unaware of. Doesn't make it okay. I'm just saying that they're not aware that we were trying to fix something inside ourselves, that the Ashkenazim, at least, the Jews who had been in Europe, had been forced into very specific professions for many generations that caused us to really be unfamiliar with manual labor, with farming, with construction, with things that were really required. We needed to reconnect to. We needed to reconnect to our land. We needed to learn to be workers, to be manual laborers. We needed to learn how to be farmers. We needed to learn all those things, and fighters, also soldiers, right? Like, we needed to learn all that to fix something inside ourselves, to become normal again, because we had become abnormal. And we knew that if a situation was created where, well, Jews could be the owners and Jews could be the managers, but all the workers and farmers are going to be Palestinians, then that would have happened. That would have been the situation, and we wouldn't have fixed the thing inside ourselves. So it became very important. Now, I'm trying to explain it. It's not defending it. I'm explaining it. So the Zionist movement basically championed this notion of Hebrew labor, and businesses and enterprises that were hiring Palestinians were considered betraying the Jewish national cause at that time. And if Palestinians had been aware of all of that, maybe they would have seen it differently. Maybe they wouldn't have, because from a material perspective, they're still in the same situation, and there are all these new people coming in and kind of taking up space and buying land. I'll give you another one. They're buying land from absentee landowners in Syria and Lebanon, who technically, legally, on paper, somehow own the land, but they're peasants on that land who've been there for many, many, many generations and are deeply connected to it. And so Zionists might purchase the land from a landowner who might have never seen it in his life, who basically just collects the produce or whatever, I guess it was kind of like a feudalist arrangement. But he wasn't connected to the land. He just owned it on paper, he owned it in the Western sense. So he sold it to the Zionists. The Zionists show up and tell the Palestinians on the land, who have been there for generations, whose grandfather planted that tree over there, and all those things, that now you have to leave. We're building a kibbutz here, right? Technically, the Zionists weren't doing anything wrong. They bought the land, now they want to use the land. But from a Palestinian perspective, they're being displaced, and it doesn't feel just. And so I think there were a lot of misunderstandings that took place, and there maybe wasn't enough of an effort to understand each other. And the British, of course, had for centuries been experts in dividing and ruling native populations. So they definitely fanned those flames and kind of pushed us into conflict, because it obviously gave them, the British did not plan to leave here. The British really intended to stay in Palestine forever. That was their plan. And they were just kind of making all these promises to different people and pushing us into conflict with each other in ways that were really advancing and in their interests and entrenching their rule here. So they didn't count on Jews, deciding to ultimately rebel against the British and drive them out. That kind of took them by surprise. But, but I would say the Zionist leadership and the Palestinian leadership, by and large, fell into the trap, and we made a series of mistakes, and we hurt each other in different ways, and we started to understand each other as the bad guy in each of our respective stories. And to this day, we're not ready to really reevaluate and think about, well, how does this look from his perspective? How does this look from another angle? Or if I was him, what would I have done? I think we, I come from the perspective that there is an objective truth. There is a divine truth, but humans can't really grasp it. The only thing we can do is come close to it. And the way we come close to it is by being inclusive of other people's subjective truths. So I think that by us actually engaging with the Palestinian story without fear and without concern that it's going to delegitimize our story, but really engage with it, and try to create the space for their story and our story to be simultaneously true, and to create a real, like a bigger story, a bigger narrative that's inclusive enough to encompass both ostensibly rival narratives, we could actually become co-protagonists in the same story instead of the antagonist in each other's stories. And I think, but that requires us actually, knowing each other, which is hard. Like a lot of us don't want to know each other. A lot of us at this point are like, really, in both Israeli and Palestinian society, it's a sign of weakness or even betrayal to try and engage with the narrative of the other, to try and understand the story of the other. So we have a lot to overcome. I think that's one of the biggest barriers. But I think once when we're able to do that, when we're able to actually understand each other's identities and stories and narratives and understandings of events, etc., we'll be able to get past this conflict, and we'll be able to stop hurting each other. But right now we don't even know why the other does what he does. Like, we're both attributing identities and motivations and ideologies on the other that have very little to do with how the other experiences himself. It's happening in both directions. And we both adopt very counterproductive methods of struggle. The way in which we even fight each other, the way in which we both try to win or try to defeat the other is counterproductive, because it's not based on who the other really is or how the other really sees himself. It's actually based on our fantasy of them. You're on mute.
Yeah, because it helps with the sound sometimes if I stay on mute. I just really I wonder what will unfold. I really wonder what it'll unfold. You mentioned before that we should look at ourselves as wolves too. And I mean, we have a hell of a military, and we do have very strong, tough Israelis. I mean, where do you think the trajectory is going? I mean, I really do like what you're saying. I just wonder where things are going to go.
Well, I'll say this. I'll say Zionism, meaning like what we can call like European nationalism with Jewish decorations, doesn't have the tools to deal with a lot of the challenges confronting us today. Like, I don't think Zionism has a way to include Palestinians in a Jewish state in the entire land. But I think again, they're not mature enough yet. The people who, like, for example, guys like Bezalel Smotrich or Itamar Ben-Gvir or these figures that the whole world is frightened by right now, like these scary politicians who are now suddenly came into Knesset with 14 seats, and how did that happen? And Netanyahu looks as if he might be forming a government with him. I'm not sure that's going to happen. Netanyahu is really a brilliant politician, and he might decide to do something totally different in the end. But right now, it looks like that's the government that's being formed. These guys are. I'll tell you where I agree with them. Like guys like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and Avi Maoz and the rest of them. I think I agree with their understanding of Jewish identity. I, for the most part, agree with. I mean, they're not monolithic, but generally speaking, I agree with the way they understand the Torah. I agree with their understanding of Jewish identity. I agree with their understanding of Jewish history and its meaning. I agree with their understanding of our connection to this land. I think those are very important things. I think those are very fundamental things that I can't say I share with Yair Lapid or Benny Gantz or Merav Michaeli or even Benjamin Netanyahu. Like, I share those things with Bezalel Smotrich. I think we disagree on a lot of politics. I think we disagree on Palestinian issues. We might disagree on some socioeconomic questions. I actually might feel closer to people like Ari Deri when it comes to socioeconomic issues. But I might disagree with him on other things. But I think that identity, the identity that a guy like Smotrich or a guy like Ben-Gvir has, is deep enough that if he engages with the Palestinian narrative, he'll still be him. Like, I'm still me, even though I might recognize the Palestinian story and recognize what we've done wrong and recognize what we need to do to make it right, and how, because we do have power, like we have power over them. So even if they did wrong and we did wrong, I think it's still our job, it's still our responsibility to make the first move towards building trust and like making it right. Like, I think that's on us. So we have to convince them to trust us, not the other way around, because we're the ones with power. And part of the problem is we think of ourselves as vulnerable because we haven't yet come to terms with power. We have power. We really have a lot of power for the first time in 2,000 years, and we don't know it. Like, we still think of ourselves as like this like vulnerable minority group that, a lot of Israeli foreign policy is like as if we're this like vulnerable minority group. We sometimes overuse power, we sometimes underuse power. Some of us fetishize power, some of us just want to drop it and go back to the way it was a couple hundred years ago when we didn't have power. But I think we need to become comfortable with power. We need to learn how to use it properly, use it justly. Sometimes that means destroying our enemies. Like, really, like sometimes it means making people fear us so nobody will lift a hand against us. But sometimes it means saying we don't have to be afraid. We can recognize what we've done wrong and try to make it right to this population that we've hurt. Like that's also an expression of power.
I actually love I love what you're saying. It's very interesting because I can look at it from an individualistic level. Meaning you try to be fair and just to the side that you were enemies with and may continue to be enemies with. But you say, here, I am working a solution that will directly benefit the both of us, and it'll have a massive benefit for you. But you need to abide by the rules. You can't bite the hand that feeds you. I'm the one in power. I call the shots. We are giving you the opportunity to have a very different life with us and together with us. But if you use that as a tool and as a method to continue to advance your desire for, say, taking Israel back and calling it Palestine, we're going to come down with such a heavy hand. I mean, that's at least what I hear you saying, and I happen to be in support of that idea.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the word Palestine. Meaning, from my perspective, Palestine is just one of many names for our country. Okay. And I think if somebody wants to call this land Palestine, that's cool. We've called it Palestine. Even our Torah calls this land Eretz Canaan sometimes, the land of Canaan. So like, I'm okay with people calling it Palestine. What I don't like is when they talk about Israel and Palestine, like they're two different places. Like the West Bank is Palestine and west of the Green Line is Israel. This is one country. You can call it Palestine, you can call it Israel, but don't refer to it as two different locations, right? And I think that, the conflict in Israeli society, the friction has been, do we want to have a Jewish state or do we want to have a state of all its citizens? And I think what we really want to do is have a Jewish state of all its citizens, to figure out a way to have a state that's like really, really, really deeply Jewish, at least for the people who want that, who will see it, who will recognize it. But a state where all human beings are equal, have equal access to the wealth and resources of the country. And like water, for example, there's no reason why somebody in Efrat should have more water than somebody in Bethlehem. Like we can be fair, we can be just, or we can make sure that every human being is able to get what they need in order to live good, productive lives here. And I think that's a Jewish value. And I think that makes, just the fact that we're behaving that way makes the state more Jewish.
I think it's true. You articulated it very nicely. What do you think this is ever going to happen? Is the funny question.
Well, that's the thing. I think that what we're seeing, and even though it looks scary in the beginning, that's what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that this shift in our culture, in our identity, the shift that's happening now in Israeli society, where it looks like Israel's kind of becoming this other kind of state, like who are these guys, and they're scary. And again, when we try to apply the Western political framings, it's like, oh, they're the far right, or they're the ultra national, whatever words we use. They're people who have not a European style nationalism or a Jewish flavor of European style nationalism. They have, I don't know what the word is, I guess we'll say national. They have like a real Jewish nationalism, right? It's something that's like very rooted in our land, very rooted in our history, very connected to our ancestors. Like these are people, you see, if a Zionist, if somebody with like a very shallow Jewish flavor of European nationalism engages with the Palestinian story, he often loses his Jewish nationalism. He often just becomes like, oh, the Palestinians are right, we're wrong, what are we doing here, right? That's often what happens in those cases. But if somebody like Itamar Ben-Gvir or Bezalel Smotrich or Avi Maoz engages with the Palestinian story, which they haven't done, meaning I'm obviously they haven't done yet, and that's what I'm saying. It's like we're in like a very like a new stage, and it needs to develop. It hasn't developed yet, but I think the direction is actually a good direction, because those people, their voters, maybe not them personally, but their voters, the people who vote for politicians like that, when they engage with the Palestinian story, because their identity is so strong and so rooted and so real, it's not in danger. They could actually be themselves and still recognize the Palestinians without, and recognize what we did wrong to them, or what the Zionists did wrong to them. I'll tell you, I would say that our national development is expressed by our first three kings, Shaul, David, and Shlomo. Shaul is like Zionism. King Saul, he's like Zionism. He's trying to unify the Jewish people. He's focused on our security, our economy, the things that make us a nation like all the other nations around us. That's his focus. And then David is like the national religious, like the people who vote for Smotrich, right? The guys who are like combat officers, and they're great fighters, and they want to build a temple, but they can't, because David can't build a temple, right? It takes more than, what we can call, religious nationalism to build a temple. And you could see that the Shaul people are very scared of the David people, right? The Zionists are very scared of the national religious. They're afraid that they're losing the state that they built. They built the cup, and now somebody's taking away their cup. Somebody wants to fill it with their content. And that's very frightening, but the goal is not to be David, the goal is to be Shlomo. That's Hebrew Universalism, where we are our full selves. We might be standing on the shoulders of David, we might share the identity of David, but we're facing the rest of the world and really trying to focus on how we can engage with humanity in a healthy way, in a way where we're giving, in a way where we're benefiting other humans, and including the Palestinians, especially the non-Jews who are in our land. And when you look in the Tanakh and you see the last political act of David before transitioning to Shlomo, is he recognizes and tries to fix the crimes of Zionism against the Palestinians. He tries to fix the crimes of Shaul against the non-Jews, the Givonim, the Gibeonites living under Shaul, right? And I think that's the key. I think when the Jews, it has to be the Jews who voted for Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. It can't be the ones who voted for Yair Lapid. It can't be the ones who voted for Michaeli. It can't be the ones who voted for the Palestinian parties. It has to be the Jews who voted for Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, when they're able to recognize and try to fix what Zionism did wrong to the Palestinians, then we're going to be able to progress, advance to the stage of Hebrew Universalism and actually be a leader on the world stage.
I hear you. No, that makes sense. It's just crazy to me to think of Israel suddenly opening its borders and letting people flood into the country. People are going to be scared shitless of that idea. It's a very scary thought to do that. You have Arabs from Gaza, just we open the gate. All right, guys, come, and they just start settling. They start living.
I think Gaza. First of all, I think we do have to have a conversation about refugees, but the first experiment I would want to run would actually be in Gaza, because Gaza is a place full of Palestinians from places like Haifa and Beersheba and Akko and Yafo, who fled in 1948, and at least claim that they want to go back to those places. And also we have almost 10,000 Jews who were expelled from Gaza in 2005 who want to go back to Gaza, right? And so I think if we were a gesture I think Israel could make is we can offer, because obviously Gaza is going to be part of our country. If Gaza is part of our country, then it doesn't matter from a demographic perspective whether Palestinians in Gaza or Yafo or Akko or Haifa, it doesn't matter. He's still counted the same. So I think one thing Israel could do, which I think would be a nice gesture, is we can offer any Palestinian in Gaza who wants. If he wants to go back to Haifa, he wants to go back to Akko, he's not going to go back to the house. Like the house is either gone or somebody else. Yeah. We can't do that. But what we can do, what the government of Israel can do, is build brand new luxury apartments that we would give to Palestinians who want to go back to Haifa or Yafo or wherever, like for free. They own a brand new luxury apartment proportional to the size of their family. And it's a way not only to experiment with solving the refugee issue, but also a way to redistribute wealth in the country, because they'll have home ownership, which is a big deal. And of course, we would also rebuild Gush Katif. We would rebuild the Jewish communities that were destroyed in Gaza so that the Jews who want to live in Gaza can go back and do so.
Well, here's a quick thing. Do you think Israelis would actually go and live there? And this is considering that Hamas is gone, right? Hamas is gone. Israel's already taken over. Is this the scenario?
Well, okay. Either Hamas is gone or Hamas becomes an ally. I mean, however that plays itself out. But let's say gone. Let's say we've dismantled Hamas. They don't exist anymore.
Okay.
Just for the sake of the conversation.
So say you have 5,000 Arabs from Gaza come in and live in wherever. Mm-hmm. Okay, live in Beersheba, for instance. And then 5,000 Israelis from Efrat or wherever that used to live in Gush Katif, they go back there. So you kind of have a trade-off, in a sense, even though it's all under one umbrella. I get what you mean.
Right, and right now Gaza has a problem with overpopulation. I mean, there is a crisis in Gaza.
So I think parts of Gaza though that still are highly uninhabited, and they tend to congregate in one area.
Not that I know of, but I haven't been there since 2005. Mm-hmm. So I'm not really in a position to answer that. What I understand is there's a humanitarian crisis due to overpopulation, and I think that that's something that can be solved by making that offer to those who are from refugee families who say they want to go back to Haifa. We should give them an opportunity to go back to Haifa, and we should even give them brand new apartments in Haifa that they can own and pass on to their children. But the Jews have to be able to come back to Gaza as well, and Gaza, of course, will be part of the single state that we're talking about.
Interesting. Okay. That's funny because on one hand, what's so interesting is very right-wing Israelis or even very right-wing Jews, and I consider myself a right-wing Jew, although you have your labels, is I used to be the kind of person that would say absolutely hell not to this. Mm-hmm. And what I'm coming to realize for people who are listening to this, because if there are Israelis who are listening to this that are very right wing and they go, you guys are, you and Yehuda are a bunch of lefties, you guys are naive, it's never going to work. The current status quo is not working. People have to take that into account. What we're currently dealing with is not working. And you might have some very extremist Israelis that might say, you know what, F them. Let them live in Gaza. Let them suffer. Let's, a few Israelis die. It is what it is. Let's keep suffocating them. Eventually, who knows what? Eventually, we'll kill them all or whatnot. And it's like, the likelihood is if we don't do something different, we're going to continue with the issue the way it is forever. Something's got to give. This is not a way to do it. Have all these checkpoints set up to have soldiers in the West Bank walking around. The current status quo is not working. It's not working. And to people listening to this that again are looking at us as naive, it's like, well, only God knows what happens. What I do love that you said, and I'm really enjoying everything you're saying, is we need to recognize that we are the powerful ones. We're the ones in power. It's our military, not their military. It's going to and I don't want there to be some sort of dual flag. If they want to have their flag, so be it. But I want Israel to remain the nation state, to remain for us to remain the ones in power, and they're going to have to acknowledge that as a condition. That's what I say.
I mean, eventually, I think we should be allies, meaning like the relationship we have with the Jerusalem. It's not perfect.
Yeah, but
but
they
it,
accept. But the Jews, sorry to interrupt, the Jews happily accept it.
right. We again, the argument I'm making, and it's a big if. I know that I'm just like throwing it out there like it's so easy, but the claim I'm making is that if we're able to fix the relationship dynamics, if we're able to change the roles we play in each other's national stories, if we're able to improve the role that we as Israelis play in the Palestinian story, and we're able to improve the role that Palestinians play in our story, then I think that a lot becomes possible. Because our relation, again, I know we're not there yet. I know we're still living in a reality where we're enemies. Right now we are enemies, which is so frustrating because we don't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I mean, it should go without saying, I don't think you need an ideology or a political platform to say, if anybody attacks me, I'm going to hurt him and make him sorry he ever attacked me, right? That just should be a normal human thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So nobody should feel emboldened to attack me. But at the same time, I think it is so unnecessary that we have beef. I think it's such a misunderstanding. Like maybe the Zionist leaders in the 1930s and 40s knew exactly what they were doing and committed atrocities against Palestinians, or maybe they didn't, but the masses for sure didn't, right? Meaning the masses of Jews who lived in this country, like their experience was, hey, these Arabs want to kill us, like we have to do something, right? And the experience, and vice versa. So I'm saying that, you know, it would be a great victory, a late victory, but a great victory over the British Empire if we were able to figure out a way to fix our relationship with the Palestinians. Because that's like a lasting, I kind of experience the fact that we even have beef, the fact that we even have conflict, us and the Palestinians, like every time I'm reminded of it, and it's quite often because I live here, but every time I'm reminded of it, like it almost feels like it's like a leftover oppression from when the British were here. It's like a mess that they made. We contributed. I'm not trying to let anybody off the hook. There were Zionists and there were Palestinians who contributed, but it was something that the British did to advance British interests, and we fell into the trap of fighting one another.
Sure. I mean, I think there's always going to be fighting. Most likely, there was always going to be some level of challenge. I don't think if this whole plan worked out, we'd be immune to any attacks or any killings, but hopefully it would go down tremendously. But hey, this is why I'm not prime minister, because I'm a tough person, but I don't think I would have the mental strength to go and move forward with such a decision, because the amount of backlash, oh my God. I mean, there'd be so many people there were people that would be supportive and people that would be enormously anti the idea.
Right. The first step, I'm not prime minister, you're not prime minister. We're not doing any of these big things. The best we can do, and some of the work I'm involved in, again, my primary work is Jewish education work to train young Jews to become thought leaders in this next chapter of Jewish history, to actually be the next Herzl, so to speak, meaning those who are actually creating a post-Zionist Jewish liberation ideology that can advance our story forward. But one of the conclusions I came to is that one of the goals of Jewish history in this chapter is reconciliation with the Palestinians. So the best I can do as somebody committed to reconciliation with Palestinians is not create a solution or certainly not implement a solution, because I don't have the power to do that personally. The best I can do is create the conditions to change the relationship between individual Jews and Palestinians, to have dialogue sessions like narrative therapy, and to bring Jews and Palestinians together to understand each other without feeling threatened. And it's a lot of work, like meaning it's like the words are nice, but like to actually do it is real work. But that's the best I can do. And hopefully, if that spreads, if we do that enough, and other groups, there's like other groups trying to do similar things. You mentioned Beit before, and there's Shorashim, and I mean, again, I'm talking about groups that are specifically looking to bring West Bank Jews together with Palestinians. I think that's an important part of this, because it's the Jews in the West Bank who are actually deeply rooted enough in our own story and identity and sense of mission that it's like safe and be productive for us to engage with Palestinians and start to understand them. So that's the best I can do right now. Like, I can bring people together to understand each other's stories better, and maybe to work towards some kind of shared struggle where we're co-protagonists in the same story. But ultimately, that work's going to need to be done, and the only way real political change can happen is if we're not scared of each other, if we don't relate to each other as the enemy trying to kill me or displace me or whatever. Then a lot's possible. A lot becomes possible when the relationships change. But as long as the relationships are what they are right now, there is no solution that's possible, not one. And including the status quo. The status quo is not possible either.
Yeah, it's terrible. Do you think that Palestinians have any groups like this whatsoever? Because I mean, they
well,
can't
a lot
speak
of them
out the way we-
participate in these. A lot of them participate in these. Yeah.
And they very much like the idea that you're proposing. They're for it.
Depends who. Look, everybody's different. Not everybody. They're not a monolith. There are Palestinians who really get excited by what I say, and there are Palestinians who have a lot of critiques and and pushback. Yeah, that's fine. But I think all that should be on the table.
Sure. No, the fact that we can have dialogue with them is a step forward. Yeah, I just hope that it's up to God, but if something like this ever does happen, I hope that no one will be able to say I told you so, because I am somebody that loves peace. I love the idea of making peace with people. But when I put in an attempt to make peace with somebody and they now use that as a way to step on my head and
yeah, I'm not suggesting I'm not suggesting any of us make ourselves vulnerable.
I mean, I think as a result, we are doing that to some degree.
Well, that's what people hear. Right. I guess maybe I take for granted my own strength. Maybe I take for granted the fact that I'm a wolf. Mm-hmm. And at no point do I.
Unfortunately, not all of us. I very much see that. I see myself as a wolf as well.
Right. So so wolves in the front, meaning it's the wolf again. Who are the wolves in our political system? Who are the wolves? The wolves are Smotrich. Mm-hmm. The wolves are Ben Gvir. Is right. Those are the wolves. So those are the people, and their voters should be the ones who are really engaging with Palestinians, and because again, it's safe for them. It's safe for them from physically, but meaning like they're, I don't know if I don't want to make the claim that the Smotrich voter can fight better than the Benny Gantz voter. That might be an unfair claim, but ideologically, it's safer. Meaning it's safer in terms of their identity, in terms of how they understand things, and I think that's where we need to go. I think that is the way forward. Specifically, the formula is specifically the voters who voted in the scary national religious members of Knesset. That's the sector of Israeli society that needs to be engaging with Palestinians in order to be able to move us forward.
That makes a lot of sense in a way, because even if they think that they're extremists initially, and there definitely are extremists, but then again, extremists are also what push change. That's the wild part about extremists. Like, extremists are bad to a large degree, but if the world didn't have, if different societies didn't have extremists, certain things wouldn't get done. That's the crazy part. At the same time, there is a level of respect. Even if somebody doesn't like someone, there is a level of respect you can have for that person. So even if in an ideal world, the Palestinians wish that we all packed our bags and left, but if they know we're not doing that, and at any time, and they know that even though they might not like us or love us, they have to respect us. At least leading with respect may get us to where we need to be. You don't have to love us, but respect us. Understand that we're going to stand our ground. We have a knowledge in what we believe in, like you mentioned, and in doing so, that hopefully the respect can maybe at some point lead to a love for each other, if that makes any sense.
Right. And again, I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, but I think we need to at least be conscious of the direction. We need to choose a direction and move in that direction. Okay. The direction is not a two-state solution. The direction is not retreating from our land. It's not retreating from our identity. The direction is a deeper embrace, a deeper reconnection to our land and to our identity. And those of us who have been in the front of that, those of us who are most advanced in terms of returning to ourselves, our land, our identity, our culture, those are the Jews who should be at the front of relations with Palestinians and others in order to make the relationship dynamic such that we could put a good solution on.
Okay, well, and I hear you. I hear you, and I very much agree. Then, is there anything else you wanted to touch up on?
No, I mean, it's endless. These conversations are
Oh,
endless.
I know. We can talk about this forever.
I know we kind of focused on Palestinian issues, but it's really, for me, what I would really want to encourage at least all of your Jewish viewers to do is try to think about what are the goals of Jewish history, what's already been achieved, what's left to accomplish, and what you can do to be a character in that story. How can you be an active participant in the story of your people coming back to life after 2,000 years with all of the challenges, all the, all of the flaws, not to run away, but to actually see yourself as responsible for fixing those flaws.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds wonderful. Okay.
Again, you can find me at visionmag.org or visionmovement.org.
Sure. I will again post the link. So Yehuda, thank you for joining me. It really was an enlightening discussion. I look forward to having you on again. You and I did discuss talking to a Palestinian that I was talking to from New York. We'll see what happens. We can. You're already to talk. Excuse me. You are already talking to many of them inside of Israel, so we can hopefully hop on and do another episode, getting his perspective, our perspective, and seeing if seeing what he thinks about it.
Sure.
All right. Well, guys, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. Leave your comments, good or bad. We welcome them all, and I will see you in the next episode. Okay, so hold on. I'm just going to turn off the recording.